Hello and welcome to Crimepedia Podcast, your true crime podcast available to you every Tuesday. It's lovely to have you with us. My name is Cherry. I'm your host this week, and with me as always is my co-host. It is Morgan.
Hello, Cherry. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. We need to say a big, fat, massive hello to Boston Girl. She was very, very helpful to me this week with some information from last week's show. A lot of people contacted me, give me loads of information on cocaine, which was amazing. And so I have learned a lot about cocaine since last week's episode, including exactly how much it costs. And it's an expensive habit.
Oh. Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah.
Well,
I was surprised. Yeah. I was surprised at how much it was.
Obviously, we are not drug mules at all.
No.
Because we have no idea about any of this.
I would have been royally ripped off if I was selling stuff like that because I had no idea you could make that much money from it. So, yes. So thank you to Boston Girl. She has binged all of our episodes and she sent me some lovely messages this week. So just want to say thank you very, very much for listening, firstly. And thanks for binging everything. It made my day. It was a lovely, lovely message to receive. So thanks for that.
No, absolutely. Just real quick before we get into this week's episode, we do have a few events coming up. Cherry, you'll be at CrimeCon Glasgow, right?
Yeah, up to Scotland in September.
And I will be at CrimeCon in Orlando. And if you have not got any tickets for either of those events yet, you can. And you can use our promo code, which is just Crimepedia at checkout, and you can get yourself a nice little discount.
Yeah, so you get a discount off the tickets. And what you save, you can spend in the bar.
Yes, you can.
Okay, so this week, my episode is, to be honest, an episode we usually avoid. I usually avoid kids' episodes because I always find them really uncomfortable. But this week, this episode, it was the picture. I'm going to put the picture onto our Instagram and onto our socials for you. But it was the picture of the victims that first got me looking at this case. And then when I read through the case, and you'll find out why towards the end of the show, that there's a reason that I wanted to cover this today, a really important reason. So although it's not a normal case for me to cover for you, and I think that there's some things in this case that you're going to find uncomfortable to listen to. Unfortunately, the crime scenes and the injuries are very significant in this case, and it's horrible to think that this has happened to children. But it's a very important, I think it's a very important case to cover. So if it's not your thing, I totally understand you not listening to this week's episode and you want to give it a miss, then I do understand that. But I just wanted to let you know before we get into it, even though this is a true crime show and generally we talk about things that aren't very nice, particularly this week, it's not a nice one. So if it's a trigger warning for you, then maybe give it a miss and we'll see you back here next week with a different case.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
Okay, this week's case is the Cannock Chase murders. Margaret Reynolds, Diana Tift, and Christine Darby. 3 names that you should never forget. 3 innocent girls who were robbed of their right to live, robbed of a future, and robbed of a chance to grow, to learn, to get married if they chose to, and to start families of their own if they chose to. Those choices were completely taken out of their hands by a sadistic, evil killer. But would that killer see justice? Or would he get away with murder and go on to live his life? This is Crimepedia, and this is the Cannock Chase murders. Okay, Morgan. So at 9 p.m. on the 2nd of December 1964, Julia Taylor, a 9-year-old girl, was stopped by a man in a blue Vauxhall Velox in Bloxwich. I think that's how you say it. I'm sure it's Bloxwich, but I'm guessing that the people from the Midlands are going to tell me it's pronounced differently. But that's where we're talking about, in the West Midlands. Now, this guy stopped
Mhm.
this young girl, calling himself Uncle Len, right? He claimed to be a friend
Okay.
of Julia's mum. So he's pulled over, said to this kid, "Hiya, I'm Uncle Len. I'm a friend of your mum's. Mum's asked me to pick you up and take you to your aunt's house to fetch some Christmas presents." So this kid is like quite excited. Is like, "Oh, okay." Gets in the car and she's driven to a pile of. I've never heard this before. This is must be an up north thing. She was driven to a pile of what they call slag heaps. Now, slag heaps are piles of soil that are excavated from like a mining area. They're also there's lots of different names for them, but this is the name that was used in the article that I was reading. And when
Mhm.
the excavators are digging and doing mining tracks and tunnels and stuff, it's the name for the soil and the dirt stuff that was is brought out and it's piled up. So
Yeah.
there's like this big like heaps of like soil. Um, and the heaps were near a village called Bentley, which is actually a mining village itself. Now, unfortunately, Julia was sexually assaulted during this time. She was manually strangled and she was thrown half naked from the car into a ditch. She had endured some awful internal injuries, but she was found alive by a passing cyclist around 50 minutes after she was taken to this area. Okay. The cyclist was coming past and remembers hearing like sobbing, which has been described similar to that of like a cat, like
Mhm.
faint meow noises. So the
Oh,
cyclist
yeah.
stops, goes to have a look at what's going on. It's pouring with rain. It's dark, and he stopped his bicycle, walked over to find it, and then finds this poor child in this horrific state. The cyclist, we're talking about,
Mm.
1964. So the cyclist immediately
Yeah.
flags down the nearest car, and actually a van that's passing, who then drove Julia to hospital. Now, police believe that if the cyclist hadn't come along when he did, then Julia would
Uh,
have almost certainly died from exposure to the elements within about 20
oh.
minutes.
Mm.
Now, police talked to Julia. Obviously, she's conscious. They talked to her, and she couldn't really give a lot of information, which you wouldn't expect a 9-year-old kid after such a horrific incident to give. She says that she became scared when she noticed that he had driven right past her aunt's house and that she begged him to stop and take her home, but he obviously didn't listen. There was an eyewitness to Julia's abduction. Now, the witness was absolutely certain that the vehicle was a large car with two-tone paint. The witness describes it having small fins at the rear and a hand spot lamp, which was mounted close to one wing at the end of the windscreen next to the driver's door. This
Okay.
vehicle, unfortunately, was not located. And so Julia's case kind of just faded away and became cold.
So I'm not completely familiar with obviously the British car scene back in the early mid 60s.
No.
But just from how you describe that car, that sounds like a very American type car.
I
Just talking
think
about
it's
like
more
the
of like a
size,
family car. I think
the
it's like a family
two-tone.
car. I don't think it's as big as it's not as big as
Okay.
an American car. It's more of a like
Okay.
a family saloony kind of thing, but not as big as you got your guys' cars over there.
I don't know. I can't imagine. I'm just curious like how many British cars at the time would even come in something like two-tone colors.
Mm,
Um I mean, I guess it's obviously it's possible and it probably did happen. But
yeah.
I mean, immediately, like
I
I'm
don't
just picturing this
yeah.
big American type car.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure that it was two-tone in the fact that it was as we would think now, proper two-tone. I'm not sure if that's the same thing. She saw it at
Oh,
night. So I'm thinking it's
right.
not the sort of two-tone we're thinking, like our kind of version of two-tone
Okay.
now.
Mhm. I mean,
So
that's a pretty good description. I mean, honestly, I mean,
mm,
that's a good description to start with,
yeah, yeah.
especially at night. I mean, um, I don't know how populated this area was at the time, but I'm assuming that there's probably not a whole lot of people driving around in similar looking cars. So you would think that
Mm,
that would be a good starting point to figuring out who this was.
yeah. It's funny you should say about the Vauxhall Velux being an American-looking car because that's what it looks like. It looks a bit American now you've said that. That kind of looks like a bit of an old style American car,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it
doesn't it?
does. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it
Now I pulled
does.
it up. Yeah,
Yeah, it does look like a bit
that's
American.
interesting.
I'd never heard of that car before, to be honest. It's a nice car. I
Hmm.
like it. It's a nice car.
Yeah, it's.
It's
I
a
mean, yes,
saloon. I was
obviously,
right.
I,
It
I
is a
think it's
saloon.
a little smaller than an American car, but yeah,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
as soon as you
100%.
started
Yeah.
describing it, I'm
Yeah.
like, that sounds like an American car.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It does look a bit American. You're right. So now, between July and September 1965, investigators in and around Aston, which is in Birmingham, had received a lot of reports of this lone white male in a car who had
Mhm.
attempted to entice young girls into his vehicle. And then the girls that he had managed to get into his vehicle, he had sexually assaulted. Now,
Mm.
I hate to talk about this, but it wasn't full sex that he had with the children, but he had penetrated the children. So this had happened on numerous occasions, okay? On the 8th of September
The
1965, a 6-year-old
Mhm.
girl called Margaret Reynolds disappeared close to her home in Clifton Road in Aston. Now, she walked
Okay.
from her home to Prince Albert Primary School. Now, the elder sister and her had been at home for lunch. So her sister was called Susan. After lunch, they both started walking back to school. Now Susan she was older, she went to one school and Margaret went to another school. So they kind of split halfway. It wasn't a great distance between home and school, but halfway they kind of split. One went one way, one went the other way. Later the afternoon,
Mhm.
when Margaret didn't return to meet her sister and Susan had come home, the parents became worried. They contacted school, who then told them that she hadn't attended any classes that afternoon. So the Reynolds then
Mm.
immediately obviously called the police and reported her missing. Now, in the weeks following her disappearance, they had over 160 police officers and they questioned over 25,000 people in Aston about Margaret's disappearance. Okay. There was
Mhm.
a picture of Margaret that I've seen that was her in the clothes that she was wearing the last time she was seen. I think this was a composite because it doesn't look like a real photo. It's like a composite picture of her. Now, with the assistance of members of
Okay.
the public, the investigators searched all houses, all landmarks, all premises within an 8-mile radius of where she was last seen alive with her sister. And despite all of this, despite all of these houses being, all these people being spoken to, nobody had seen Margaret. There were no more witnesses. There were no more sightings of her. And again, the case kind of went cold and there was nothing. So
So
3 months.
let me go real quick. Let me ask.
Mhm.
How? So this had been going on for what's the time period we're looking at? The first one was in '64,
So the first one was
right?
64 where she was grabbed and she got away, and then between like July and September 65, so the year later, that was when
Okay.
all of these calls kept coming in about this lone guy on his own.
And how many do we know roughly?
We don't know that there isn't an exact amount, but it is multiple accounts, and not all of them were attacked because not all of them got in the car, but there were multiple reports of a man sort of, trying to approach prepubescent girls.
And were these mostly in the Aston area then? Or are these all
Within
throughout
like
the
it's around in and around the Aston area. So it kind of concentrated close to Aston. And then of course we
okay,
had September 65, Margaret Reynolds
which was
disappeared. And that
Okay,
was
and but the first one
Aston,
was
that
in
she was in Aston.
first one was Block Switch.
Block
Now these
switch,
are
yeah.
happening in and around
But it might be
Aston.
Bloxitch.
So
It
the
might say
question
Bloxitch. I don't know how
Block
it's
Switch.
pronounced. Bloxitch.
Okay, so then if this is the same person, then we're talking about someone who either works or resides in
Yeah.
at the Aston area,
Yeah, in the local area.
and I'm wondering if now kind of thinking like if the first one just happened to be this other location,
Yeah.
if that was just random or if that was either home or work again.
Mm. Mm.
Um, because I mean, most people would say if someone's targeting this general area, chances are they're familiar with this area
Yeah, I
and they're
agree.
going to be comfortable with the area. And I just happened to look up this Clifton Road in Aston, and this doesn't seem like a road where you would be staking out because
No.
it's like a dead end, right? So it's
Yeah.
not a through street. It's a small
No.
street. So that almost seems like that has to be not targeted, but just was opportunistic. So
We're
I wonder
also
if he
talking
was
about
happening just to
19
be driving through it.
Yeah, but we're also
Go
talking about
ahead.
1965 when there isn't a lot of vehicles on the road, like nowhere near as many vehicles as now.
Right, 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 right.
So that's the other thing, is that there aren't that many vehicles actually on the road at that time.
Okay. And I'm just curious. I'll be curious too. Like, I don't want to go back to the car, but like, how much? Like, if that was that car a lot of money in around that time. So is this
Yeah.
someone that's going to be someone that's middle class? Because this at least Clifford Road area, I'm assuming is probably like a middle class area,
Uh-huh.
or is it someone that's going to have a little bit more money?
Mm.
Obviously, it is a family car. So does he have a family?
Yeah.
Um, those are the things I would start questioning.
Okay. Well, 3 months after her disappearance, on the 30th of December, at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a 5-year-old girl named Diana Tift disappeared from the street close to her home in Walsall. Now, Walsall is a
Okay.
market town in the West Midlands. It's about 9 miles from Aston and about 2.8 miles from Bloxwich, if that's how you say it, or Bloxwich, whichever way you say it. She was outside
Okay.
her grandmother's home in Chapel Street. Now, she was walking back to her home nearby, and her home was on Hollymeadow Avenue. She was carrying a small, this is what breaks my heart, is the descriptions of these kids. She was carrying a small pink plastic handbag with a little white strap that she had received
Mm.
as a Christmas present. Okay, because we're talking about the 30th of December, right by Christmas. She she was with a friend. The last potential sighting of her was a family member who believed that she had seen her walking past the nearby laundrette en route to her home. So Diana was reported missing by by her parents at 7 p.m. Now,
Mhm.
exactly the same as Margaret Reynolds, despite the searches that they did everywhere, there was no trace of her discovered whatsoever. And approximately 2,000 people searched for her, and nobody found a trace of
Wow.
her.
Mm.
So this is starting to become a bit worrying. Like, if I lived in the area, I would be worried. In the On the afternoon of the 12th of January 1966, the body of Diana Tift was found by a man hunting rabbits. She she was lay half concealed in undergrowth, which was next to a ditch at Manstey Gully on a place called Cannock Chase in Staffordshire. This is in
Okay.
between the villages of Penkridge and Littleton, and it's about half a mile from the A34. And it was on like a or not a disused, but like a very rarely used farm track. Now, unfortunately, she had been raped. She had been suffocated with the hood of the anorak that she was wearing, and there were traces of semen on her body and inside her body. That was
Oh.
the only forensic evidence that was left at the scene. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, also, the naked body of Margaret Reynolds lay inches away from Diana.
Oh,
Her body was
no.
severely decomposed. None of her clothing was recovered except for one shoe, and the pathologists were unable to determine her cause of death purely due to the decomposition. So, obviously,
Mm.
police are looking at this and have come to the conclusion that these cases are linked. due to the fact that both girls have been put in the same place. Okay.
Yeah.
So, of course, a murder investigation was then underway. Officers from Scotland Yard were called in, and the first suspect, naturally, was the man that found both the girls. Now, he was a poacher with a history of violence. However, he was completely cleared by police, had a very strong alibi,
Okay.
and it was found not to be him. Police, looking at the crimes and looking at the fact that girls had been approached and not assaulted, but other girls had been assaulted, police believe that the killer would strike again. So, in preparation, the head of Staffordshire CID, a guy called Detective Chief Superintendent Harry Bailey, devised these plans so that should there be a phone call of a child missing, all the local neighbouring police forces would work together in this like trap, and they would put roadblocks within the vicinity of Walsall and the surrounding areas so that all the exits would be kind of blocked by police officers. And so that the minute
Yeah.
they got a phone call, there would be this code word which they used, which was called stop plan. And straight away, everything would be put into practice. All the local police forces would know what's going on, and they would hopefully be able to stop anyone from leaving the area and going anywhere near Cannock Chase with their victim. Okay.
Wow.
Unfortunately, though,
That's a lot to do. I mean,
yeah,
to
yeah,
get all
yeah,
these police forces to work as one unit. I mean, you have trouble today getting police forces to work together. Yeah,
yeah,
it's better, but I mean, is it? I mean, how they do it? Is it one police department calling the next police department? So we're
yeah.
just playing a
I
game
think
of
so.
phone tag.
Yeah, I believe
So by
so.
the time
I
you
believe
get
that's how they did
to,
it.
the 4th, 5th, 6th down the road, I mean, are you gonna have time to get stuff in place? It's a good idea, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It's a great I mean, it's the best they can do,
Mm,
but you still have to be very lucky to catch someone this way.
yeah, you do. And unfortunately, it looked like it hadn't worked because a 7-year-old girl named Christine Darby was lured into a grey car as she played with her friends near her home in Camden Street in Coldmore in Walsall. Now, this happened on
Okay.
the 19th of August, 1967. This is around 2:30 in the afternoon. So this perpetrator is not waiting for nightfall. When we're talking like 2:30 in the afternoon, a group of kids outside playing, and this man pulled up in his car, asked Christine and two of her friends if they knew the directions to Coldmore Green. When the kids pointed to the direction of Coldmore Green, which was actually just up the road, he pretended to be really confused and so asked Christine, could she get in the car and show him the way? And he
Oh,
promised to
no.
drive her back to her friends immediately afterwards. Now, it was at the time Christine's family didn't have a family car. So she was really excited to get into this car. So she got into the car to show the man the way. Her friends saw the vehicle reverse back and then drive at speed in the opposite direction to Coldmore Green, in the direction of Cannock Chase. So the kids immediately ran inside Christine's house to tell her mum what had happened. She then immediately ran to a payphone and notified police. Operation Stop was put in place, and then the plan to install roadblocks at all minor and major exits exiting from Walsall and further afield was implemented immediately. Okay.
Yeah.
So the kids obviously could describe this guy, which was fantastic because this seems to be like a really important part of this investigation. The kids explained that this man was white, again, in his mid-30s. He was clean shaven with dark brown hair. He was wearing a white shirt and drove a grey car. Now, again, we're going back to like 1960s car. Now, they said it was possibly an A55 or an A60, okay? A Farina is what they said. So it's a model of an Austin Cambridge or a Morris Oxford. Now,
Okay.
they said that he spoke in a local accent, but one of the kids, a little boy called Nicholas Baldry, was 7, said that the man had pronounced Coldmore Green as Karma Green and not Coldmore Green. So it's said like Coldmore, like it's pronounced like COLD more, Coldmore Green, but he called it Karma
Uh-huh.
Green, and a local person would call it Karma Green, whereas an
Okay.
outsider would call it Coldmore Green. So this
Oh.
suggested that the guy was local. Okay. this information obviously pushed the police on to know that this was a local man. And then they started
Mhm.
looking for him in and around the borough of Warsaw. So
Yeah.
on the afternoon of the 22nd of August, a soldier named Michael Blundred, who was on the search for Christine, was searching a cluster of trees within an area of Cannock Chase known as, it's known by the Forestry Commission as Plantation 110. Okay, so that's the
Okay.
area of Cannock Chase that he was looking at. He was in a search party with colleagues, and he found the body of Christine Darby.
Mm.
So he immediately put his hand in the air, signaled to everybody that obviously he'd found something, and then
Yeah.
officers obviously he's not involved in this. He's just part of a search team. Now this next part is not a very nice, easy thing to listen to. Christine was lay on her back and she was naked from the waist down. Her arms were outstretched and her legs were parted. Now, there was quite a lot of blood at this crime scene,
Yeah.
and this indicated to police that she had been assaulted where she lay. Okay. She had signs of petechial hemorrhage about her face and about her neck. And the fact that her tongue was slightly protruding indicated to police that she had died from suffocation. So again, we've got very, very similar crime scene to the other two girls. Okay. She had black trousers on that day, and they were actually located at the scene a few yards away from where her body was. The location of her body was only a mile from where they found Margaret and Diana.
Mm.
Obviously, they were discovered the
Okay.
year before, but this is very close.
Yeah.
All three children lived within a 17-mile radius of each other and a short distance from the A34. So a forensic botanist conducted an analysis of the lava that was within Christine's nostrils. This told the botanist that the death had occurred 2 to 3 days prior to the discovery of her body. A detailed examination of the crime scene found that there were tyre tracks that had been made by a family-sized saloon car close to where Christine's body had been discovered. Now, this is a very important part of the case, the fact that they've got tyre tracks.
Yes.
Even more so is the fact that there were 2 witnesses to this vehicle
Oh.
being where it was. Over the following months, over 600 vehicles were identified and eliminated from this investigation. Now, the 2
Okay.
witnesses that had been there, actually there at the scene on that afternoon, reported to investigators that they remember seeing a grey vehicle parked close to the location where Christine's body was discovered. And the witnesses gave a complete, brilliant, detailed description of this guy. The vehicle they believed to be a Farina model or an Oxford saloon. And this is part where they had found the vehicle's tyre
Mhm.
tracks. The man that was the male witness was certain that he would recognise that man again if he saw him again. The other witness, which was a
Yeah.
woman, she said that she had seen the vehicle driving slowly in the direction from Plantation 110. She was certain that the vehicle was an Austin Cambridge. So they're all saying this same kind of car. Okay. Both witnesses gave this description of this guy, and police distributed over 2,000 copies of a facial composite. And I'll put this on our socials. You can see the composite all throughout the country. Now, on the 5th of September, this is the day that they did it, one national newspaper, I think it was the Express, was publishing this picture of this composite picture of this person on the front page. Okay. There were
Yep.
thousands of tips that came in about this composite drawing. Thousands of tips came forward. And obviously the police then had a lot more work to go and work through. So the police also began tracing every grey Austin A55 and A60 in the Midlands. They checked over 1,375,000 files from
Whoa.
11 local tax offices, car taxation offices. So they identified
Wow.
23,097 vehicles that needed to be traced. And the owners of those vehicles were interviewed and their alibi was confirmed on the date of Christine's abduction.
Wow. That is impressive.
That is a
That's a lot
huge
of
amount of
work.
work. Yeah, it is. And well
Yeah.
done to them. You can't fault them for being thorough.
No. No. I mean, every case they should do this, but especially this case when we're talking about little kids. I mean,
Yeah,
this is horrific.
it is.
Yeah,
It
so
is
good on them.
horrific. Okay, but the case, unfortunately, isn't without its flaws, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, on the 4th of
Mhm.
November
Yep.
1968, a 10-year-old girl, a girl called Margaret Alton, suffered an attempted abduction. Now, this was also in Walsall, in a place called Bridgeman Street. Now, this guy approached her as she stood on a section of waste ground, and she was putting bits of wood on top of a bonfire. The man drove in the direction of a nearby garage forecourt and asked her if she would like some rockets and some Catherine wheels from the front passenger seat of his car. She was really excited, approached the car, but as she got closer to the vehicle, she noticed that the passenger seat was covered in newspaper and she couldn't see any fireworks. As she hesitated, he tried to grab her and drag her into his vehicle, but luckily she managed to break free from him and run. A woman was coming out of a local fish and chip shop, a lady called Wendy Lane,
Mhm.
saw this guy attempt to grab this girl and then saw her get away and then tried to get away, and then saw him drive off. And she was brilliant. She made a mental note of the make, the vehicle color, also the registration plate. So she
Oh,
gave it all to the
good.
police. So she said it was a green Ford Corsair with a cream roof, and then the registration plate was 429LOP. Okay. Police contacted the local registrations office for Walsall, and no such vehicle registration existed. Okay. But
Okay.
detectives then moved them around a little bit and discovered that there was a local record existing for a green and cream or green and white Ford Corsair with a registration number 492 LOP, not 429
Oh,
LOP. So she saw it as 429, but
yeah.
actually it was 492. This vehicle was registered to a 39-year-old local man called Raymond Leslie Morris. Now, Raymond
Mm.
lived in a high-rise block of flats on Green Lane, which was directly opposite Walsall Police Station. He was arrested in connection with Margaret Alton's attempted abduction the following morning. He completely denied any knowledge of the incident, but he did confirm to detectives that he had only bought the Corsair in the previous year, having previously owned a grey Austin A55.
Oh god. Wow. Okay.
Not only that,
Okay.
he looks extremely similar to the composite drawing. Now, unfortunately, the woman from the fish and chip shop failed to identify him from an identity parade, and this resulted in him being released from police custody.
No.
But police were convinced that this guy was the guy they were looking for. And so although they had to release him, they kept him under surveillance and they kept looking into him, okay? Looking through their records, this is frustrating. Looking through their records, they found that he had been questioned 4 times between 1964 and 1968 in relation to the abductions and murders. He had initially been considered a strong suspect on each occasion. The only reason he was exonerated was the fact that his wife had given an alibi for him, which then meant that his index card, because obviously back then they didn't have computer records, his index card that they used to use
Mhm.
had written on it, alibied by wife. Okay. So by
Okay.
the 12th of November, an examination of his insurance record revealed that at the time of the abduction of Julia Taylor and the murder of Margaret Reynolds, he had once owned a 2-tone Vauxhall Velux, which he sold in
Oh,
November
Jesus.
1965. Okay. They also found petrol receipts placing him in those areas at the time of the abductions. So obviously now police can't ignore this. They've got probable cause for
No.
this. And on the 15th of November, he was arrested as he drove to work. Now, I'm so pleased, but his wife was also detained for questioning. Because to me, this is
Good.
way too coincidental for him not to be the person they were looking for. She was questioned
Right.
at Hednesford Police Station by Scotland Yard investigators. And initially, she was adamant that her statements had been correct and that her husband had returned home at approximately 2:00 in the afternoon on the date of Christine's abduction. However,
No.
within hours, she confessed to have given her husband a false alibi on that date.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Why? Why would you do that?
Do you know why? Do you know what her reason was?
What's that?
Because she didn't think he would be capable of hurting a child.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Now,
It's that's so frustrating.
yeah, it is frustrating. Really, really frustrating.
Like there had to be something inside of her that like was telling her that
Yeah, there
this is the
must have
guy
been.
that the guy's a monster.
Yeah, there must have been. There must have been.
That is insane.
Mm.
I can't
Now,
believe that. Okay.
Raymond Morris refused to answer questions to police. He refused to participate in a identity parade lineup, and because of that, police brought this Victor Whitehouse, the guy that was the main witness, to the station the following
Uh-huh.
morning, and he positively identified him as the man that he had seen parked near Plantation 110 on the
Oh,
date of
good.
Christine
Yeah.
Darby's murder. Okay. Then obviously Morris then asked for a solicitor. So Raymond Morris then said, look, I think I need a certificate, a solicitor. The Austin 55 A55 was quickly traced. It was recovered from the guy that he had sold it to, and the car was
Mhm.
impounded pending a forensic examination. Now, a subsequent police search, this just made me livid. Okay. A subsequent police search of Morris's flat on the 17th of November uncovered a small
Mhm.
cache of homemade child pornography.
Oh,
Many of these images had the same girl in them. Okay. The background in several of the images revealed that the photographs had been taken in his flat, right, that he shares with his wife. And an examination of the negatives revealed that the images had been taken in August 1968. Now, his face wasn't shown in any of the images. He was clever, but not clever enough because he had a very distinctive wristwatch. And in several of the images, this wristwatch is visible. Okay. Investigators were able to match this. He had like distinctive scars on his arms, and by putting
yeah.
his arm in a certain position, as the photos were, they were able to show that that was his hands. That child was his wife's 5-year-old niece.
Oh, and she had no idea. You're telling me
Allegedly
she
had
had
no
no
idea.
idea.
Allegedly had no idea.
This is horrific.
It is. On the 17th of November, he was formally charged with Christine Darby's murder. So he was remanded in custody at Winson Green prison, to await his scheduled court appearance. And by December, 2 further charges of indecent assault pertaining to his niece and a further charge in relation to the attempted abduction of Margaret Alton had also been filed against him. Now, at the trial, Carol Morris, which is his wife, testified on behalf of the prosecution. She described the route her husband typically took to and from work, contrary to the statements that her husband had given police.
Mhm.
She said that it did take him in close proximity to Camden Street and Coldmore Green. She then retracted the statements that she initially told investigators about them both having been shopping on the day of Christine Darby's murder and Margaret Alton's attempted abduction, because she didn't think that he would be capable of doing something like that, like she said earlier. Now, Morris actually testified in his own defense. His testimony lasted for 5 hours. Now, not even hearing what that guy has got to say, I am livid. To have to sit in that courtroom and listen to that arse just whine on for 5 hours I would think I would
Mhm.
be boiling. I would be absolutely boiling. My hat goes off to any investigator that had anything to do with this case, because they must have wanted to rip that guy's throat out.
Oh, no, absolutely.
He denied ever meeting Christine Darby. He denied ever being near Cannock Chase on the date of her murder. He also disputed his wife's testimony, saying that she had been under police coercion and that she had changed her statements because she was scared. when he was questioned as to the pictures of his niece, he said that he chose to take the nude pictures because there was an incident immediately prior when she accidentally exposed herself as she fell backwards. So straight away, victim blaming. She accidentally exposed
Yeah,
herself,
it was
5
her
years
fault.
old. So it's all her fault. And then this is what made him take these images of her. He claimed that he was
Yeah,
disgusted with himself having taken these photos and didn't know why he took them. I know why he took them, because he's a sick bastard. That's why he took them. Excuse my language,
yeah.
but this is why I don't cover these cases.
The fuck it
Yeah. There's a
is
lot of beep, 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 beep,
disgusting.
beeps. Disgusting. Now, the good thing is the jury deliberated. I would hate to be on the jury for this case. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before reaching their verdict at
That's
4:28.
2 hours too long. That's 2 hours
Yeah.
too
I
long.
honestly
I would
think they
like
probably 10 minutes into it would have been right. Yep, he's guilty. Let's just go and like waste a bit of time so that the judge doesn't think that we've come to this too quickly. Anyone want a cup of tea?
yeah. Oh my god.
Well, the good thing was he was found guilty on the attempted abduction of Margaret Alton and the rape and murder
Yeah,
of Christine Darby. He was sentenced to life
good.
imprisonment. And the judge said, I quote, "I do not intend to keep you long or make any comment about this terrible murder. There is only one sentence, as you know, life imprisonment." He was then transferred from Winson Green Prison to HM Prison Durham on the 19th of February to begin his life sentence. Now, a subsequent appeal he lodged was dismissed in November 1969. Okay. So you may wonder why I I decided to do this case today. Let me just tell you a few more little things before I tell you why. Shortly
Yeah.
after his arrest, police investigators uncovered some interrogation records dating back from early 1966. And this was during the search for Diana Tift. The records
Yeah.
revealed that his brother, so this is Raymond Morris's brother, had entered Walsall Police Station stating that he and his mother had long known of his his predilection for prepubescent girls, and they believed that he was
Fucking hell.
capable of abducting and murdering both girls. Okay? At that time, they hadn't even found the girls, but his own brother and his mum had gone to the police station to do this.
Yeah.
The report had simply been marked no further action because there was nothing to substantiate this guy's statement, because there was nothing at the time other than the fact that
Why
he
don't
said, look,
you
my brother's a bit
investigate
weird.
it?
Well, there was
Why
no
don't you
evidence.
investigate it?
Well, that was what
You
happened
got
at the
it.
time.
Yeah. You investigate. You investigate. You investigate. You look into it.
Mm. But don't
It's
forget,
just
they did. And he was alibied by his wife. So
his wife should be in jail, by the way.
she should be in jail. See,
She
now
should have went to jail.
he was convicted only of murdering Christine Darby, but he was
Why?
considered the chief well, because there's no evidence linking him to the other two girls at the moment. But he is
Okay.
considered the chief suspect in both the deaths of the other girls and also the abduction and attempted murder of Julia Taylor as well. Even though there's no evidence, he is the most likely suspect. Okay.
Was she not able to identify him?
Well, this is in the list of questions that I've got for you in a minute. Okay, so hold
Yeah.
that thought a sec. Now,
Okay.
shortly after he took the stand and began to testify at his own defence, Julia Taylor, who was then in her early teens, stood up in the public gallery, hysterical, pointing at him and crying, "That's the man! That's the man that did it to me!" And she was ushered out of court in tears.
Good. I'm glad she did that.
Yeah, me too. In 2011, 42 years after the girls were murdered, 81-year-old Morris issued his first ever statement about these killings. He told the Sunday Mercury, "No acquisitions of guilt can ever compensate the loss that the families involved must feel." I hate the way killers think that this is okay. Like, don't dare
Yeah.
talk about them. How dare you talk about what their family must be feeling?
Right.
Like, how dare you? He then says, I will always maintain that I am not responsible for the murder of Christine
Oh,
Darby, and hopefully my fight for justice will uncover the truth. I can only say over and over again, I didn't do it, and hope that someone will listen. Unfortunately, Raymond Morris died at HMP Preston Health Facility of natural causes on the 11th of March 2014 at the age of 84. Now, he never admitted his guilt in any of the Cannock Chase murders. He never expressed any kind of semblance of remorse whatsoever. Now, my questions in this case, why did I do this case?
yeah.
I look at this evidence, and to me, it looks very obvious to me that he did this, that he did
Yes.
all of this. Okay.
Yes.
However, there isn't evidence to prove that he did some of these murders. Okay.
Mhm.
So what if he didn't? What if he didn't act alone? What if he didn't do it? Could it be that there is a murderer still out there? Because if you remember, I told you there was semen found at the scene of Diana Tift's murder, right?
Yes, right.
Obviously, at the time, DNA wasn't a thing. There was evidence of sexual assault on Christine
Mhm.
Darby. Now, DNA didn't come into play until the 80s, okay, late 80s, early 90s. But could
Right.
we not subsequently test the samples?
Well,
Where
yeah,
are the
if they kept
samples?
it,
Why can't we
that's
why
the
can't
thing.
we
Do you
test
keep it?
them? Exactly.
Yeah, the
Have they
question
kept
would be,
them?
did they keep them, and how did they keep them, and
Yeah.
is there enough of whatever remains of it to even test?
Yeah.
We don't
And
know.
that's no. No, we
We don't know
don't.
how they kept how the stuff was stored. They weren't thinking in the 1960s. They weren't thinking, "Oh, we need to save this so here in 30 years we can test
So
for
what if he
DNA," which we
didn't?
don't even know what it is.
What if it didn't match? What if he didn't do this? He's maintained his innocence throughout all of it. I mean, it's quite obvious the
Right.
girl was stood up and identified him in court. It's quite obvious that he had something to do with her. Looking at the cars that he owned, the cars that were described around the time of each girl's abduction and murder was a
Mhm.
car that he happened to just own. I mean,
Yes.
99.9% looking at what we've got, I would say he is responsible for this. But there's
Yeah.
just that tiny 1% that kind of makes you think, what if? What if he didn't do all of these?
Mhm.
What if he started after those first abductions? What if he saw his chance and he started then? What if he started after
Mhm.
taking photos of the niece? And that really bothered me. It really bothered me that this
Yeah.
isn't a sewn up 100% case. And there's the pictures that I'll put online that it's three beautiful, beautiful little angel faces. And they are,
Yeah.
you'll see what I mean. They are beautiful children. And they are just that. They are children.
Mhm.
And I just thought everything looks like it's this guy. Everything
Yeah.
points to this guy. But you know what it's like that you can't 100% say it's him without the evidence to prove it's him. And to me, I was like,
There
God, what if it's not? What if he didn't do the first ones? What if he only started after a certain time as like seeing his chance? Because he's thinking somebody else has done this. They're looking for somebody else. I can do
Mhm.
this and it will be passed off as him.
Yeah. That's what's frustrating with these older cases because
Yeah.
if this were to happen now, all the evidence we would need would be right there for
Yeah.
us,
On
right?
all three girls.
On all 3.
Yeah.
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 But it's but yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, is it possible that there was someone else in there? Because it's obvious that he's a criminal, right? I mean,
Oh,
no doubt
yeah.
about it.
Oh,
100%.
100%. He
And he
definitely
does
she stood up in Julia stood up in court and said he was the one that did it to me. So
that's him.
she's already pointed that out to him.
But
And Christine
but why did
Darby
it take
she couldn't talk for herself.
but why did it take for her to be sitting in a courtroom for her to get
Mm,
that chance to say that's the man that did it?
yeah. She shouldn't have had to do
Why?
that. She shouldn't have had to
No.
do it. She
And
should have been able to do that behind a screen.
what about these other girls who had been abducted
Yeah.
and
The attempt,
assaulted
yeah.
and
Why
weren't murdered,
there's
where
nothing to
were they?
say. Exactly. And
Why
this
why
is
would they
what's
say, "Hey,"
yeah.
because
This is on my list of questions.
they're just as they're they are just as important to this case as anyone else.
Yeah.
They deserve justice just as much as anyone else.
Yeah. And I and
They
I
have
I couldn't
they
see
had to live.
anything.
They had to live with these abductions and assaults for the rest of
Mhm.
their life,
Yeah. They'll
and they
never
don't seem
forget
to be
it.
anywhere in this case.
No. They're not meant it's
That
not
should
mentioned. Did they show those kids pictures of him so that they could
Mhm.
positively identify the man that abducted them and assaulted them? Because this it's multiple assaults. So this could be
Mhm.
multiple people that could come forward and say that it was him. But there's no mention of that in any of the articles that I read. There's no mention of these people that were
Yeah.
that were assaulted.
The only thing I can think of is that the prosecutors and police, they did not wanna put, because 'cause they're still kids at this point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're like, 5, 6, years old, and this is now late 60s, so they're
Yeah.
probably around 10 years old, so they're still kids.
Yeah.
So I understand you wouldn't want to have to put them and face this man if they don't have to.
No, and
So
I mean
maybe that's it?
yeah, maybe because he's already going away, isn't he? It's quite
Mhm.
clear he's already going away for the other murder and the other attempted abduction. So maybe they
Right.
just thought, well, look, we've got him anyway. He's not going to get any more than a life sentence. He's not gonna matter because he's going to die in prison anyway.
Mhm.
But I think that I think maybe as a victim, you kind of need to have that it was him that did it. You need to
Yeah.
have that closure of knowing that you've got the man that did it, that it was definitely him. And maybe they did. Maybe the
Mhm.
police did show them pictures and they know that it's him, but they haven't actually said that he has been um sentenced on multiple counts of,
Yeah.
indecent expose or indecent abduction and things like
Yeah,
that.
the
So
last thing you'd wanna do as a prosecutor is to have the defense call one of these girls up onto the stand
yeah.
and
And
have them
yeah.
face questioning
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
don't have to.
No,
So I
that's right.
understand that,
Yeah. And
but
you don't want to
it's still
weaken your case
frustrating.
either. You don't want to
Mhm.
bring into any doubt that maybe it wasn't him in the jury's mind. So that's the other thing. If they're going to get him on what they can get him on, that they've got like damning good evidence on it, why
You
would they bring
have to
in
have
some
strong,
yeah.
strong evidence.
So why would you try and get in other kids? Because kids are notoriously bad witnesses because they're kids.
Yes.
And so you don't want to give the defense a chance to wheedle their way out of it and put any kind of doubt in the jury's mind whatsoever. So if you know that what you've got is going to get him in
Mhm.
prison for life. It's the same as when we talked about the case um oh, what was it? It was I've forgotten her name now. That's awful. The case where she was shot by the guy on Craigslist.
Natalie Bollinger.
Natalie. It's the same as that. They accepted the
Mhm.
plea, didn't they? Because they knew that they would get him. Otherwise, there was a chance that he would get off. So even though they
Yes.
didn't want
Yeah.
to, they knew that they could get him with that, even though if they went and tried to do it another way, he could then walk free. So maybe it's the same in this case, in that they thought, right,
Mhm.
we've got damning evidence on him for this. So maybe we'll just get him on this. And luckily, the jury had good sense on them that day and sentenced him to prison. But I don't like the fact that he comes out with his only statement and he talks about those murders and he's
No.
allowed to have his voice. Lock him up,
He shouldn't.
shut that door, don't ever hear from him ever again, feed him the bare minimum to keep him alive and forget about that guy
Yeah.
because he doesn't
So,
deserve any speech whatsoever, not at all.
no. How can you be a journalist and, get this comment from this guy and then be like, "Oh,
Because
I'm gonna put this out."
it
It's a
sells your
non-story.
paper. It sells your
But it's a
papers, doesn't it?
non-story.
Mm. But people love
It
to read
isn't
that kind of thing. It's like, oh, the man that murdered these kids is finally going to talk. He's going to give his side of the story. No
But
one
he
gives a
says
shit.
nothing.
No one cares what his side of the
Yeah.
story is because no one wants to hear from him. No one cares. I'm so angry. It just made me so mad. And I just feel like these girls and these other young, these other kids that had been abducted and had been violated by this evil, sick man. You can't even call him a
Yeah.
man, can you? This evil, sick individual. Um, they
Well,
deserve more airtime. They deserve to have their stories told, and they deserve more. They deserved more.
no, absolutely. I mean, I do have more respect for someone who has done horrific things, who can admit and come out and say, you know what, I'm a fucking terrible person. I've done these horrible things. Um, uh, you know what? You're never going to be forgiven for what you've done, right? But at
No.
least I have like some sort of like at least they have dignity in them knowing that how shitty of a person that they are,
Mm,
right?
mm.
But to go to your deathbed and just
Deny, deny,
continually
deny.
just like deny it. All you're doing is you're just spitting in the face of the victim and their family.
But that's it, isn't it? That's what they thrive on. They thrive on this last minute control. It's the same as people that go to their death not ever saying where a body is.
Mhm.
What they damn well it was them that did it. They know damn well it was them that did it. The family knows damn well it was them that did it, but they still go to their grave having never told anybody where that body is because it's their last ounce of control. And a lot of the psychology in this kind of behavior is an aspect of control. The fact that he may have felt like a lesser man because perhaps the women in
Mhm.
his life were very controlling. And so he can then control a child and he can then, put fear into a child. And that is something that makes him sexually aroused because he's got mum issues or he's got wife issues or whatever issues this guy's got. And that's the thing. It's always the rape, the controlling, the same with people like Levi Belfield. It's all about control and it's all about them being the ones in control. And this is just another example of it.
Mm.
So that
So
is this
frustrating.
week's case for you. A little bit different to what we normally do, but I wanted these girls to I just had this awful thought in the back of my head that what if it wasn't him that did all of it? And what if he did most of it but didn't do all of it and
Mhm.
that there was somebody who stayed free that was never caught for these, that was
Right.
free living their life somewhere. And that just made me really like unnerved.
You know what? Like, while it might not have happened in this case, I could see something like that happening where someone
Mm.
sees an opportunity
Yes, I agree. That's what I
and
mean. I totally agree.
they're like, oh, someone else is doing this,
Yeah.
and if I go ahead
This
and
is my
do it,
chance.
then
Yeah.
this is my chance, and maybe it's going to get pinned on them, and then
Yep.
I can,
That's exactly my thoughts when I was reading this. What if?
yeah.
What if he didn't do all of them?
I just from what you've told me and what
Mm.
I said earlier, because I mentioned like this Aston area, either
Yeah.
he lives in the area or he's worked
Yeah.
in the area,
Yeah.
and you said that the wife said, yeah, he does take that route to go get to work.
Yeah.
So to me, I would say that most of these can be attributed to him.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you.
Um,
It's most
could there be
likely that he did
most
them all.
likely? Is it possible that one of these other like attempted abductions or abductions with assault were someone else? Yes, it is possible.
Yeah.
Um, we don't know everything about the investigation and what
No.
what the police know and what they don't know. So it is possible, but I think we can safely say that a majority of these incidents
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
was this man.
I agree. And I'm glad that Raymond Morris is dead.
Me too.
I'm
He
glad.
lived way too long.
He did way too long. And I think that if there was ever a time when the death penalty was a good thing, it would be in this case.
I hope he had a really rough time in prison. A really rough time.
I hope so too. I really hope so. And I
And
hope that death was long and painful.
And his wife is so lucky that she did not go to jail
I
or
hope
prison.
she never forgets about what she did. I hope she thinks about that every single day of the rest of
She,
her life.
she allowed him to get away
Yeah,
with this.
she did.
She
She not only
allowed
allowed
him
him,
to
she gave
assault.
him. Yes. Because if she had gone forward in the first place, he wouldn't have been able to carry out the rest of those. So she is just as bad as
Mm-hmm.
he is. Just as
Yeah.
bad.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Yep.
Anyway, right, let's get some dumb criminal in here because I'm about to spontaneously combust with rage. So,
No. All right, so let's do it.
Hey, you's a dummy, and you's a piece of shit.
Sherry, this person is a dummy and he's definitely a piece of shit. So this dumb criminal, this story starts with a false accusation of child abuse. Okay,
oh God.
so so a woman, she's actually a social worker that was out in Colorado. Her name is Robin Nasita. She she was initially accused of calling in an anonymous tip to report that a council member was sexually abusing her own son. Okay.
Yeah.
So law enforcement were able to trace this anonymous call back to Robin Nasita's personal cell phone. So after investigation, they determined that it was a false claim, that this councilwoman was not sexually abusing her son. So then Robin Nasita was sued in a libel case and was awarded $3 million in damages. Okay,
Right.
so we're sitting there. Okay, but
Yeah.
this is where it gets dumb. Okay,
Okay.
so while she was getting ready to go on trial, she allegedly, I don't even say allegedly, she basically filed documents claiming that she had been diagnosed with a brain tumor, making her incompetent to proceed with the trial.
Oh, wow.
All right. Now, the chief deputy district attorney for this case decided to go ahead and look into the claims and called the doctor on file. His name was listed as Dr. C. Marquez of the New Mexico Oncology. He
Wow.
claimed,
Wow.
or he stated he claimed to speak to someone who was a doctor, but they were unable to find anyone licensed in the state of New Mexico with that name. There was a Facebook page created for the practice, which was created in January of that same year, that had absolutely no activity or information on employees. Okay.
Oh, what?
Not only that, the a conferring doctor, he was the doctor who worked for the Denver Health Medical Center. He found that the medical records that were submitted included not only typos, but the MRI scans that were included were found on the internet.
Oh, you absolute idiot. If you're
And so
going to
he was able to
lie, at
determine,
least don't do
yeah.
that. Now, what an idiot. In a court of law as
Mm-hmm.
well. Seriously.
Yeah. So she ended up getting charged with 10 counts, including influence and public servant,
Good.
forgery, impersonation, and evidence tampering.
What an absolute goon.
Yeah. So instead of, facing trial for being a shitty person to begin with,
Yeah, you've ended
you
up
are a
adding all that other
dumbass for
stuff to
trying
you.
to,
Yeah.
oh, yeah,
Got it
complete
even
dumbass to try to
worse.
fabricate this stuff. So
What an
Robin
idiot.
Nisita of Arapahoe County, Colorado. Yeah, you are a
You are
dummy
a
and you are a piece
dummy.
of shit. Unbelievable.
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 Well, finally for this week, before we go, I won't keep you much longer because we've babbled on for ages. But finally for this week, just want to say a massive, massive, huge congratulations to our friend Casey of the Cult Vault podcast, who has reached 1 million downloads. That girl works
Unbelievable.
so damn hard on her podcast.
Yeah, she
and
does.
It's just her working on it, and she does a great job, and she thoroughly deserves 1 million downloads. So well done, Casey. We are so proud of you. You've done a fantastic job. So good for you.
Absolutely amazing.
Download ours more, please,
Can't
because
wait.
we want 1 million.
One day.
I'm going to go and download ours
we'll
a few
get there.
times. Oh, thank you for joining us this week. I hope that this case hasn't disturbed you too much. We'll be back next week with a case from Morgan. So for now, be nice.
And bye.